everybody. My name is Amy. I'm Fiber Arts Amy here and on Instagram. Welcome to my channel. I am doing something a little bit different today, but my dog knows I'm talking with my floss tube voice, so she's coming running, and she's gonna be very confused because she doesn't know. You might be able to hear her tags jingling. She doesn't know where to go because there's nowhere for her to sit up behind me right now. What I'm going to do today is talk about quilts, and basically only about quilts. And I've been inspired to do this by a few people, well, two people in particular. Kelly, who's Pages and Stitches, she does floss tube. She also does separate quilting videos, and I love her quilting videos. The thing I love about her quilting videos is that they are just like floss tube, right? But for quilts. She's just she's showing quilts she's made. She's talking about her whips. You get to see her progress as she goes through. And I find that inspiring. And I love cross-stitching, but I also love quilting. So it's really wonderful to see some content that's kind of floss tube style, but with quilting. And then I think it's Laura, Lala D Stitches. She just made her first quilting video. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog whining. She's very confused because I'm not usually standing in the kitchen talking. Usually sitting somewhere where she can cuddle me, or I'm standing somewhere at our bed doing laundry and she can lay on the bed and hang out with me. She's very confused. Anyway, Laura, Lala D Stitches, she just did her first quilting video, and it was very similar to Kelly's style, right? She's just, I think she called it her quilting bee. And she's just showing quilts she's made and talking about them. And that's what I would love to do if I had any real world, in-person friends that quilted. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. I usually, I might show a little bit of quilting at the end of my floss tubes. But Kelly and Laura really inspired me to go ahead and start making quilting focused videos. So that's what I'm going to start doing today. You know me, you watch my floss tubes, so I don't have a huge plan other than to start showing my quilts. I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on the clock, and I'm just gonna talk for a while and show quilts. And I'll make sure I show some of the things that I'm working on. If you've seen my floss tubes and you know that I have hundreds of cross-stitch whips, it's the same for quilting. The way I approach quilting is very much there's just different aspects to quilting, right? There's cutting, there's sewing the sewing machine, there's hand sewing, there's pressing, there's the binding stage, there's all these different stages and tasks that go into quilting. And I get in the mood for a certain task more than I get in the mood for a certain quilt. So if I feel like cutting, it doesn't matter if I have 20 quilts that are already cut out and ready to be sewn together. I'll go cut another quilt. Or cut for another quilt. So I got a ton of quilting whips too. Anyway, I guess I'll jump in. I've been standing here because there's some quilting eye candy that I thought I'd start with. So let me explain. This is an applique quilt that I made. I very rarely make wall quilts. I've made a few, but I am much more motivated by being able to curl up on the couch or in a bed with somebody I love and cozy up in one of the quilts I've made. That's more my motivation, enjoying quilting. So I don't do a lot of wall quilts, plus I cross stitch. So wall space is at a premium. Also, in case you didn't already know this about me, I'm not going to clean to do these videos. So this is real world, real life. The buffet is kind of a mess. Thing of apples, there's bread for tonight's French toast dinner, there's stuff. So like I said, space is at a premium, right? I've got cross stitch there. You guys, if you watch my floss tubes, you've seen these cross stitches before. This is just a wall in our dining area, which is part of the kitchen. So I've got cross stitch there. Where am I pointing? Cross stitch there. There was more on the other side down there. So yeah, wall space is at a premium, so quilts typically go on a couch, on a chair, or on a bed. So I learned to quilt, so I always wanted to quilt. I always thought they were amazing. Something about making this cozy warmth that you can wrap up in, and that is like a hug from the maker. It just has always enchanted me. I always wanted that and wanted to be able to do that. And when I was 24, my mother-in-law gave me a sewing machine. It was like a $90 Brother from Walmart. Worked just fine. There's so many amazing fancy sewing machines out there, and I have one of them now. Technically, I have two of them. But you don't need them. So just if there's anybody out there being like, oh, I want to quilt, I made a ton of amazing quilts on my $90 Brother from Walmart. I showed up to it for my first class and was totally made fun of. Not even gonna lie or like cover that up. People absolutely made fun of me, and I did great in the class. And the quilt I made is beautiful. I can show it to you later. So don't let like that kind of cost put you off. You can any machine that'll do a straight stitch, you can quilt with. Anyway, I taught myself initially, and then I think in 2009 we moved to Florida, and in those first 5 years I did make a number of quilts. But we moved to Florida, and there was a quilt shop very nearby, and my husband, as a like birthday gift, bought me a beginning quilting class. And so I ended up taking lots of classes at that shop. It was Once Upon a Quilt in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I haven't been there in a dozen years now, but it was like my whole world for several years there. I kind of lived there. And one of the classes I took was hand applique. So this was my hand applique quilt. We used a Baltimore Album book for the like curriculum to get the blocks out of. And the instructor, I loved the instructor. Her name was Maria, and she's wonderful. But anyway, she chose different blocks to try to get us experience with lots of different things, like doing like perfect circles here, different kinds of flowers. So there's some beading in this, a little bit of embroidery. But we got to pick our own fabrics and do hand applique. And we tried, it was a wonderful class because we tried lots of different techniques for doing hand applique. I very quickly, sorry if you can hear my dog whining, I very quickly settled on needle turn applique, which I know is something a lot of people hate. I love needle turn applique, and I love it because it's low maintenance. Now, I love handwork, but also when I'm quilting, I'm not a perfectionist. I tend to be very much a perfectionist in a lot of areas of my life, but not usually in my crafting. And if something, like freezer paper method and other methods always seemed like they took so many more steps, needle turn applique, I can just sit down, I can trace the shape and sew it on. That's it. It's just easy, simple. That's why I love it. It's just, there's not a lot of stuff to it. I, for years, considered myself a lazy quilter. If something takes a lot of steps, if there's a way to cut that down so I'm not using as many steps, even if it means I don't have as perfect of results, I'm fine with that. My dog's wandering off. She might go sit in a stitchy chair because it's usually where I am when I'm like filming these things. So anyway, this is my applique quilt. I love it. I actually only just finished it recently, like during COVID, which is embarrassing because I moved away from Florida a dozen years ago, and this sat needing to be put together. I did hand quilt it. I usually use a long armor at this point, but for something like this, partly because it was small and partly because so much handwork had already gone into it, I went ahead and did some hand quilting. My hand quilting is probably what most people would consider big stitch quilting. That's just the way my stitches look. They're just not tiny, and I'm totally okay with that. But anyway, I'm really proud of it. I really love it. It goes well in my kitchen, and so yeah, that's like my one wall hanging. This shelf, I got the idea of using this sort of thing from Crosshatch Quilts. Chrissy? Is it Christy or Chrissy? My apologies, Crosshatch Quilter, that I can't remember. But I got it from her. She had something similar. And I just went looking on Etsy and found this shelf with this bar the bar just slides in and out. So I just put a hanging sleeve on the back of this, and it hangs here. And it hangs in front of Legos. Got Legos here. I guess you can't see them over here. I've got Castle over here. So yeah, so that's my hand applique quilt. I am going to pause and move where I'm standing and show you one of my other wall quilts. Okay, I'm back. And I forgot to say, my dog is right there and she's whining. I forgot to say that today is Wednesday, March 8th. I'm going to be doing Chatelaine Wednesday later. For those of you who watch my stitching videos, you probably know what that is. And 2023. I also have a touch of laryngitis. So if you're noticing the weird voice, that's what it is. We just had like this cold running through my house. Okay, so here, I'm just thinking about it. I think I have 3 wall quilts. Maybe 4. But this is the other one I'm going to show you today. So this was done for a quilt show. I used to belong to a quilt guild, and they put on a quilt show every 2 years, and there's always a theme, and one year the theme was Quilts on Fire. Now, let me just say, I didn't always fit in with my quilt guild. We'll try not to go into all of that, but I always, like, they never quite got what I was doing. I think I was, like, a little too weird for my quilt guild. Anyway, I had just read or you know, had gone through a quilting book about doing these sort of like, I don't know what they're called. Like, so this is all fusible applique. And I'd used fusible applique many times before this. But this book was all about, actually there's one little piece I need to tack down. But what you do in this technique is so like I picked out my color palette. I picked out, these were all just like scraps from other projects. Picked all of those out, took like a chunk of it, what size didn't really matter, fused it to one side, a fusible web, and then cut the pieces into like all different little kind of shapes, right? Like they didn't need to be, it didn't matter really what size or what real shape they were, nothing. Just cut them all up. And then laid them out on a background fabric, which I'm sure was just like white something. So then you just lay them all out. So they're all backed in fusible web, and you lay them all out to make the, in my case, I was trying to make like forest fire, right? So kind of lay them out the way you want them. And then I know I was inspired. I don't know if I saw the picture in a book or like on the internet. I was inspired by other pictures people had made of like silhouettes of trees on quilts. And I do this a lot. Like I'll go through a quilt book, I'll read a quilt book, or I'll be looking on Instagram or something, and I'll see something I love, and I'll make my version of it. So I won't necessarily follow the instructions. Like I'm very much inspired by something, like somebody else's work. It's not my brand new idea, but I kind of go at it my own way sometimes. I don't try to necessarily recreate what the other person has done exactly. I don't necessarily follow the instructions exactly from a quilt book. I, you know, change it up and do my own thing with it. So anyway, this wasn't a pattern per se, but I definitely learned the technique and was inspired elsewhere. And if you guys want me to like look up quilt books and kind of exactly where I got ideas and things, I can totally do that. Please feel free to ask me questions. Either, you know, you can always DM me on Instagram, where I'm Fiber Arts Amy, or ask questions in the comments here, and I will do my best. I'm just a fly by the seat of my pants kind of girl, so I'm not prepared. I'm just like walking around my house showing you stuff. So anyway, then I did the same thing with some black fabric. I took some black, and this isn't solid black. I was probably reading. This is, I think it's like one of those Moda always around fabrics. It's just got like slight marbling to it. Like there's little bits of gray. It's not grunge. I want to say it's Moda marbles, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I just fused some black, like a fat quarter or something, to some fusible web, and then cut it out into good branch shapes and fused it here. And so honestly, the quilt didn't used to have the UFO. The quilt was initially just the tree in the background, and it was beautiful, and I loved it, and it fits the theme of Quilts on Fire, although I think people thought like I interpreted it too literally or something. Anyway, I felt like it was missing something. I felt like we needed to have a reason for the fire other than just like forest fire. And I got like, it just, this idea happened in my head where I was like, what if there's a UFO, right? Like, because if there's a UFO there, we don't even know if this is Earth. And if it is Earth, we don't know if the aliens started the fire. We don't know if the aliens are here to help us and like save humanity from the way we burned our own planet to the ground. Like, this is a much more interesting quilt to me with the UFO. So it was sort of done, and then I was like, it needs something, decided on the UFO, and just like, you know, hand sketched like a UFO shape. And that's my quilt. I quilted it myself on my machine. I just did lines radiating out from like the center point here. And I guess you can probably see some of that quilting. It's kind of showing up a little bit. That's it. That's that quilt. So I have a quilt rack. You guys can't see it. I have a quilt rack right here, just to orient you in my home. So there's, how do I point on camera? There's my front door. There's some cross stitch. It says welcome to our home. A little fairy on it. That's a Passione Ricamo design, which I would have showed in one of my early floss tubes, if you watch floss tubes. But I have a quilt rack here. It's a metal quilt rack. I can try to show it in another video. I love this quilt rack. It's just pretty. It's wrought iron. It's from Victorian Trading Company. I don't know if they still carry it because I bought it so long ago, but I know I saw it there a few years ago. So they may still carry it. So I'm just gonna start pulling quilts from this quilt rack and try to show them. It's weird to be standing up and doing this, but I think necessary for quilts. Okay. So this quilt I'm going to chat about. If you watch my other videos, you know I'm chatty. So settle in. This was my beginning quilt class quilt. And it's a sampler quilt. I'm going to show it to you. I'll have to move it up. So it's got all these different blocks. Like this was the first block we did, right? Just a 4-patch. So sometimes you may have heard me make comments about, I get kind of a chip on my shoulder about beginner quilts and like what counts as a beginning quilt. This one, so the quilt shop, I took this at Once Upon a Quilt in Davie, Florida. This quilt class covered everything from cutting, which was good. I'd never used a rotary cutter before. The first several quilts I made in those first like 5 years, I did with like cardboard templates that I made. So, because I was like, I don't know what a rotary cutter is. I don't need that. Until I learned to use one. And now, of course, I use a rotary cutter. But they made up, it was great. They made up fabric packs for the class. And the fabric packs had lots of different styles of fabric. So I chose a Civil War Repro pack. I like a lot of different things. I'm not like I don't like just one style of quilt. I like lots of quilts. So I like Civil War Repros, but I could not live on Civil War Repros alone, if that makes sense. So anyway, I chose this one, but they had like a K-facet kit. They had more like kind of traditional moda, you know, like flowery kind of stuff. There was lots of options. I chose this. So back to what makes a good beginning quilt. The thing that I love about this class, and why I can get kind of grumpy when people say like a quilt is good for beginners or bad for beginners. This quilt taught us enough that we could, when I was done with this, I felt like I could follow any quilt pattern. And obviously some quilts are harder than others. You know, some quilts you're going to need to learn new skills. But we learned so much doing this, right? We did flying geese. I had to do, you know, half square triangles. You know, there wasn't any curved piecing in here. Sorry, I'm kind of knocking into things. But I had done so much by the time I was done this quilt, with this quilt. Like there's the log cabin. I had done so much that I felt like I could follow the instructions for any quilt I wanted to make, right? And so to me, like I hate when people are like, say like, well, if it has half square triangles or triangles in it or like flying geese, it doesn't make a good beginner's quilt because those are so hard to make. I disagree with that because to me, a good beginner quilt is whatever quilt you're motivated enough to finish, right? Like it doesn't matter how hard it is. If you love it and you're willing to learn the skills for it, then it's the right beginner quilt for you. That's just my take on it. I kind of wish that when we were talking about quilts, we more talked about whether they were more challenging or less challenging or required like more advanced skills or less advanced skills, because that to me has more of a like atmosphere of like this might take really advanced skills, but if you're willing to take the time to learn them and you're willing to maybe not have your quilt be perfect, have at it, you know? So anyway, I really appreciated that the quilt class was this way, that we weren't just making a really simple quilt where it was like all 4 patches. This class taught me a lot. It was maybe once a month for several months or something, or like every other week. It might even mean every week. I don't know. But it was, you know, many successive classes. And it went all the way through basting and starting to quilt your quilt. So I took this quilt class, I'm confident, in 2009. I finished quilting it maybe in 2018, 19, something like that. I do not love quilting on my small-throated machine. It is not my favorite thing to do, and there are so many quilts I want to make that I'm just going to toss that on my couch for now. There's so many quilts in this world that I want to make. I'm generally happier taking things to a long armor at this point. Okay, this quilt I love. It's one of my favorites. It's just a small, like, lap-size quilt. Pretty sure that was like a Moda-line. So I got this out of a magazine, and I love it. Basically, all you do is you take, I think, like a 40 by 40 inch piece of the white, like a background fabric. To be honest with you, I want to make this quilt like 8 more times. I love it. But it's a quilt as you go. So, well, it wouldn't have been 40 by 40. It was probably like 30 by 30 of background. You take a jelly roll, you layer it with the backing and the batting, and you lay out, and you have to pin all of the jelly roll strips, and you weave them in and out, you know, going over and under, and then you stitch them down. And as you're stitching them down, you are quilting the quilt. And I use this purple so you can see it really well on the back. Right, it's just quilted in like a grid fashion. And then once you get that like center, like 30 inches or so, you just put down the, you lay down the border, you know, upside down, you sew your seam, you flip it, and then you quilt it. And then bind it, and I just did like wavy lines on my border, which they're not very good wavy lines. But I love this. I love this quilt. It's got raw edges, like all these, the jelly rolls have the raw edges. It's just, and it's older, so it's like soft and cozy, and I don't know, I love it. I know I have a Halloween jelly roll from like years ago. I want to make a Halloween version on black. Just haven't gotten around to it. Sorry, Freya. I hit her quilt. This one I made when I had a jelly roll that I didn't really know what to do with. But I also really like how this came out. And this has become kind of a go-to for me if I'm making maybe like a baby quilt or something. So I just had a jelly roll that I felt like using but didn't really know what to do with it. And some of you may know what I'm talking about. So what you can do, and you can do them with any size square, but you put the two, did I say jelly roll? It was a layer cake. Did I say layer cake or jelly roll? Regardless, it was a layer cake. I just put 2 layer cake squares on top of each other, right sides together, and you just sew around the outside with a 1/4 inch seam, and then you cut diagonal to diagonal, or corner to corner on both diagonals, and then you press them open. You got 4 half square triangles at that point, and then you can put them together in different patterns. So I just put them together in like a pinwheel design, and this would have used 40 layer cake squares, so 2 left over, and yeah, it's just simple, no measuring, but like fun. It was just fun, and I love picking fabrics. I love deciding which fabric's gonna go with which other fabric. I find that very enjoyable, so that was really fun to me. Another one. So this is, oh, that last one I showed you. This one I also quilted myself. I basically did a triangle. I did like a 1/4 inch away from each seam. I tend to like looser quilting. I tend not to like really tight quilting, because I like a really drapey, cozy, throw it on you whenever you want kind of quilts. So this one is, and it could go, it's basically square, could go either way. So I had a charm pack of this Tula Pink fabric. I also have yardage of it. Is it Nightshade? No, this wasn't Nightshade. It wasn't Nightshade. It's the women with like the Day of the Dead like makeup on. Why am I blanking on which fabric line it is? Oh yeah, it's Tula Pink. It wasn't that long ago, but I don't know why I bought a charm pack. I already had yardage. It's just like the same, like I can't get out of a store without buying some Tula Pink. I had seen some quilts like this. I have some others like this that you'll see at some point, where I've seen in books before, where sometimes I think a quilt can look great. It's more of like a modern quilting thing, where you just do a strip of piecing and then a lot of empty space. And so that's what this is. This black, I believe, is a grunge. Let me look. Oh yeah, the black is a grunge. I love grunge. And then it's just a strip of, I just pieced together the charm pack squares and ran them down the middle. And that was that. And it makes a really great lap quilt. And I really like it. This one went to a long armor. I do not like pieced back. I shouldn't say I don't like pieced backs. I prefer for myself to not use pieced backs. I'm just kind of done at that point. When I finished a quilt top, I don't want to have to go piece it back. It's a pain in the ass. And I feel like it's really hard to, like, working with those huge, I don't have like great quilting space, working with those huge cuts of fabric and getting them right and getting them, to not make any mistakes in that seam. I don't love the idea of like kind of catching my feet on the seam on the back. So anyway, whenever possible, I do a wide quilt back, and then any fabric that doesn't get used just gets put in my stash and, scraps to use for other things. So anyway, this was just a polka dot that I really love. All right, this is one of my favorite quilts, even though it was tiny. It is one of the earliest quilts I made. It still has threads hanging off of it, so that's awesome. I love this quilt. It is, I think the style quilt is called Chinese Coins. Pardon me while I get a sip. It's really small. Like, this would make a good baby quilt. It's a good extra quilt to throw on, like on your feet if your feet are cold. I could be wrong, because this was years ago. So this was one of the first quilts I made after I had taken the real quilting class. And I had, like, that's when I kind of discovered quilting books and like patterns and whatnot, and was starting to like really get into it. I feel like this is a Blackbird fabric line, an old Blackbird. I could be wrong. I didn't know who Blackbird Designs was at the time. They were just one of a number of fabric designers. You know, like the designer name didn't really stick in my head or anything. I didn't know them very well back in the day. And it might just be the color palette. I know they used to do a lot more fabric lines. This looks very much like the Blackbird color palette to me. I remember shopping for this fabric. I remember, and this was a jelly roll that I kind of cut down, because these were probably, I think these were 2-inch strips cut, like you cut them into 2 by like 4-inch pieces or something. I remember the quilt shop in Florida where we went, which it wasn't Once Upon a Quilt. We were at a different shop where I bought this fabric. It's very small, this quilt is. So this is I don't even think it's like 44 inches wide. I'm pretty sure this is just, you know, fabric off the bolt that was wide enough because the quilt is so small. But I love it. I love the colors. I like my binding. I almost always do my binding by machine, where I sew it down to the back and then I flip it over to the front and stitch it down on the front. Almost always. The exceptions are quilts where I've put there's a lot of handwork that's gone into it. Then I'll do more handwork to finish the binding. I'm just going to show this. Sorry. I'm going to show this because it's here, even though it's not a quilt. I used to crochet, so my first like craft was crochet. I know a lot of you like learned to sew from your mom or your grandmother, or you learned cross stitch from, you know, your family. I did not. I sort of did. Okay, so my grandmother sat me down when I was like 8 and taught me how to crochet. I didn't pick it up again. Like after that day, I did not pick it up again until I was in college. And I got into crochet pretty big time. Made a lot of blankets. So this is my Halloween crochet blanket. There's 6 of them. There's 6 cats. I made this in college or maybe grad school. So it would have been complete before 2004. You may notice that I have not woven in my ends yet. These are all just like granny squares, but you know, put together, sewn together in different, in a pattern to make these like cat blocks. Every once in a while I'm like, I'm gonna weave in those ends, and I'll sit down and spend an hour or 2 weaving in ends, and then I'm good for a couple of years. And it just sits. So anyway, it's warm and cozy. It's probably just made out of like Red Heart from Walmart, which is what I had access to at the time. This is actually one of my earliest quilts. How am I doing on time? Am I talking too much? Let me know if you like this video. If everybody hates it, I'm not going to do it again. But it's fun to do. It's fun to talk about your quilts, right? So this is a quilt that I made before I ever took a quilting class. I know that in part because there's no binding. I did it like, it's blowing it out, like pillowcase method, where, you know, you sew like, make it like a quilt sandwich, but with the front, the right side of the top facing the right side of the backing, and then turn it inside out and sew this opening closed. My husband and I had gone on a trip to, where was it? I want to say it was Hilton Head, but it wasn't Hilton Head. Maybe it was. We'd gone somewhere and visited a quilt shop. My husband loves flannels. I like them too. These like plaid flannels. So I bought like a stack of them. think like a fat quarter bundle and didn't really know what to do with them. Because this was like, again, before I ever took a class. I ended up deciding just to make these like stripes. It's like a rail fence, sort of, without the regularity of a rail fence. Yeah, I just made these. It's kind of big. It's a wonderful quilt. It's thick and heavy because it's still got batting in it, and all these lovely flannels. It's a really good like throw on, like when you're laying on the couch watching a movie, throw it on you, keep you nice and warm. And I used flannel on the back, so it's like soft and cozy. So anyway, and this is very much my quilting style. I feel like I go for really complex with like lots of handwork, or like my favorite quilts are like very simple. Like my favorite quilts to make are very simple, classic, repeating block designs. It's just what I go for the most. This quilt, my God, there's more and more. I can't believe I fit this many quilts on this quilt rack. This quilt was made, would have been shortly after we moved to Pittsburgh about 12 years ago. It's made from fabric from Joann's. I haven't always felt like I could or should shell out for quilt shop fabric. Very simple design. This is like an étoile pattern, so I wanted to do something, like I wanted to keep these blocks bigger. This is actually like a full-size quilt. It could go on a bed, but it was just simple. It was lovely, simple, fun to make. I quilted this one myself. When I quilt myself, I often do just stitch in the ditch, or like echo quilting, where, you know, you might do, like I did, there was one quilt where I did like the triangle shape, but like a 1/4 inch away from the seam. And I have some others where I've done that, where it's like concentric circles or triangles or shapes moving out. Yeah. This is like tiring. It's good to do this, right? It's good to make sure they all get out and refolded differently every once in a while. All right, this is also one of my favorites. So I had some Civil War repros I bought. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that does this. So early, like early quilting days, I buy fabrics that I love, but like I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. And for some people, if they only love one thing, right? Like if you only love Civil War repros, or you only love 30s repros, or even if you only love K Facet, all your fabrics are gonna go together, right? It doesn't matter that they're from different lines or sometimes different designers, like they're all gonna work together. Well, I love everything. So my fabrics do not all work together. So I have to kind of pick and choose what I'm gonna use. Anyway, I got this idea out of a book, and similar to what I was saying earlier, I kind of made it my own. This was after having taken a quilt class, excuse me for the froggy throat. So this could be done easily, quilt as you go, but I didn't. So each of these squares then just has, so these are like raw edge here, just has other squares placed on top, and you just stitch them down, just like, I don't even know if it was 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 from the end, not 3/8. Math, Amy, math, do math. 1/4 inch would be 2/8. I'm thinking 3/16, maybe closer to like 3/16. It looks more than an 1/8, but less than 1/4 to me. I was probably aiming for 1/4 or something. But yeah, you just sew them down and then, you know, piece them together. It's very simple. It's not a big quilt. But anyway, this I made with like the stash of Civil War repros I had built up to that time, and used some leftovers. I used a lot of leftovers actually from, excuse me while I cough. Excuse me. The beginning quilting quilt that I made. I used some of those leftovers. I still have leftovers of those that I use. And then to quilt it, I just did like an X through each block. And remember earlier I said I'm lazy? I eyeball everything. So they make all kinds of cool products and like tapes and things where you can, excuse me, like mark out the line you want to follow when you're quilting. I'm way too lazy to do that. So I just put it down and like eyeball corner to corner. And this was a good one to do that with because you have a corner like every couple inches. So you can end up with a pretty straight line just by like going corner to corner. Remember, not a perfectionist. This was another quilt that, or another class that I took at Once Upon a Quilt in Florida. This, I believe, this is probably Minnick and Simpson fabric. I could be wrong. I mean, the line would have been from more than a dozen years ago, but I'm gonna say it was Minnick and Simpson. This was, I believe, out of a pre-cut book or a layer cake book. The pattern was, and yeah, you just, so there's the 4-patch. This is just a square, and then you have these blocks with the corner square triangles on the edges to make that star pattern. It was just a class about making that particular quilt. All right. I'm guessing I've been talking for about 45 minutes. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna put these away, and then I'm gonna move where the camera is again and show you more of my actual sewing space and some of the things that I'm working on. There's a lot of them. All right, I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I'm just at the other end of my couch. Real world, this is my sewing space. We have a a big for an 1,800 square foot house, living room, and we have an extra dining room table in the living room, and that's my sewing table. It's where I'm trying to get oriented in the camera. So there's where my sewing machine is. Freya, lay down. Just lay down. Oh, good girl. So since I'm here and there's like a ton of quilts just sitting on the couch, I'm going to go through some of those quilts for you too. Freya, down. This quilt, I love. This was from a Connecting Threads kit that I got years ago. And this was long-armed. I mean, it probably took me 15 years start to finish to get through this kit. It wasn't finished that long ago. So let's talk about Connecting Threads. So they sell they have their own lines of fabric that are less expensive. They've gotten a lot more expensive in the last few years. And they've also started selling a limited number of name brand lines. Connecting Threads fabric, I would say is not their brand fabric. I would say is not quilt shop quality. But I would say it is probably worth the price you pay for it, right? It's heavily discounted from what you might pay for a quilt shop quality fabric. And I certainly have used them. I like a lot of their kits. I will buy their kits. But I love this. It's very simple, but obviously very planned with where you put the different fabrics. I really like this one. So it happens to be one of them that's thrown over the couch at the moment. My dog's sitting on this. She's gonna be mad I moved it. This is a pillow. So when our old couch died, it had these big soft squishy pillows. So I took off the kind of old dirty gross canvas covers and started playing with making different pillow covers for them. I'm just showing you because it's sewing related. This was Tula Pink Jelly Roll. Tula Pink Jelly Rolls are hard because you do not get enough of the fabric, right? Her fabrics, a lot of them, you want a huge chunk to really see what's going on in the fabric, and you don't get that. I'm trying to see if this line had horses. Oh yeah, here we are. So this had all these crypto animals, but you're missing most of them by cutting the line down so much. Can you see? Oh, see, you can see part of a horse down here. But they're really pretty still, just the colors. So I use one of those to cover a pillow. This was a spoonflower fabric. I did this early in the pandemic. Clearly that was the mood I was in. So I bought some of this fabric and covered pillow. Freya, I'm really sorry. I'm going to keep moving you if you're going to keep sitting on my quilts. So this, excuse me, is my family's picnic quilt. We love to have picnics in this family, and like all we'll do is just take a quilt out into the front or backyard and eat outside. When the weather's nice, we do it all the time. So I made, excuse me again, I made a specific picnic quilt for my family. Excuse me again. The reason for doing that was so that they would know which quilt to grab to throw on the ground. I am definitely someone who wants my quilts used and loved, and if they get worn out in the process, that's great. But I felt like maybe it would be prudent to have a specific picnic quilt. And this is probably the quilt that, like, after I die, my kids are going to fight over, right? Because there's just so many... Please pardon my dog's growling because someone's walking by outside. There's just so many memories attached to this quilt. Freya, stop it. Stop it. Those dogs could beat you up anyway. Knock it off. So anyway, I made a specific picnic quilt. So it doesn't mean other quilts can't be used, but this is the, like, if we're having a picnic outside, we can say to someone, oh, go grab the picnic quilt. And they know it's this one. The fabric's from Joann's. It's got little ladybugs on it. It's got a wide backing from Joann's on it. I did use a pattern from a Thimbleberries book to make it. It was, very simple, but this was one of my first quilts post taking that first class. So nothing seemed easy at the time. I quilted it myself badly. So I stitched in the ditch along the sashing lines. And then I practiced doing free motion quilting of different motifs in the blocks. I did some swirls, I did some stars, and they're really bad. But that's okay. This quilt, it's got stains on it. It will one day fall apart. I will probably end up having to patch it. Some of the quilting's coming out. There's look, this is bad. But it is probably one of the best loved quilts in the house. And I certainly love it. Okay, Freya, can I get under you? Here, I'll let you keep that one if you give me this one. Okay. This is one of our backup outside quilts. If we need more than one quilt, or maybe somebody wants to go outside and read, this is one that I'll often suggest they take. It's very simple. Is it actually a jelly roll race? It is not a jelly roll race. It's like cut and planned. See how all those seams line up? I'm sure I'm not sure. I probably got this as a pattern out of a jelly roll book. There's extra wide backing, although the quilt only is about 60 by 60, maybe even a little bit smaller. But it's mostly dark colors. And I quilted this myself, just doing stitch in the ditch. But the dark colors, it's just not going to show dirt, that much if it gets stained or whatever. This also, let's see if I can find any of the holes to show you. So this is where I kind of learned my lesson about jelly rolls. And I'm a pre-cut fan. I like pre-cuts. I kind of like pre-cuts even more now that I'm doing English paper piecing, because jelly rolls are the perfect thing to cut 1-inch hexies out of. But so jelly rolls tend to, at least for Moda, they'll have that pinked edge. You got to be careful where you consider your 1/4 of an inch seam, where you're measuring that against. I'm not finding any right now. I know this one has some little holes in it. There's places where my strips got, the seam allowance was too small. And so some of the seams are coming apart a little bit. Is that one? You know, I find them all the time when I'm not trying to look for them. And now that I want to find one, I can't. But I know there are places in the quilt, this isn't one of them, where like the seams just come apart, right? Like it's just open. I think because I got too close to the edge of that pinked edge. And the last one I'm going to show you for now. Oh my God, my dog is like, what are you doing? This is Connecting Threads fabric. I think but not, it wasn't a kit. This was like an autumn themed fabric line, and I just loved the softness of it and like the visual softness of it. I got pre-cuts. I don't know if I had a layer cake or if I had a couple of jelly rolls. There's definitely more than one jelly roll to make this, because this is like easily a full-size quilt. I like big quilts because like if I'm cuddling under a quilt, like I want it to be up to my chin and I want to cover my feet. And I don't want to be like wrestling with somebody over it, so I like big quilts. Anyway, I actually remember we were sitting here in our house near Christmas one year because the Christmas tree was out, and we were watching, my husband and I, kids were in bed. I don't even know how many kids I had at the time. We were watching a Planet of the Apes movie while I did all the cutting for this. And again, I don't remember if I was cutting down layer cakes or jelly rolls, but it's very simple, but I love it. Okay. There's a lot going on around me, so I'm not entirely sure what to show you. I'll start here. So, I have these 2 table runners I need to finish. This is my favorite. I love this one. This is made using, I think it's Allison Glass fabric, if I'm right. Is it Sun something? It's not Sun Washed. Sun Prints, maybe? So Lori Holt or the Fat Quarter Shop has started putting out these foundation papers that you can use to make different blocks. So I wanted to try them out. They come in, this one is like a crazy quilt block. And this was a Lori Holt one. I like Lori Holt. I'm not quite a Lori Holt fanatic the way, some people are. No criticism intended there. Just, I like her. I like her a lot. But I'm not like she can do no wrong. This happens to be one product I won't use again. There is nothing wrong with it per se, but I have made crazy quilts and crazy quilt blocks without the papers, and I just like them much better without the papers. There's just not that much variability when you're using the papers. I actually have a larger quilt, a lap size quilt, that I made using the like larger block meant for layer cake squares. It's at the Long Armor right now. And I still felt the same way, even though with that size, there's like 5 different components to each block instead of just the 3 you see here. It was a pain in the butt. I found the papers difficult to get out, even though I use a short stitch length. I'll just make crazy quilt style the way I've done it before if I do it again. Also, something you might be noticing is how tiny my table runner is. There's a lot of table runner patterns and kits out there that are like big. Like it could be a table runner or like a bed runner at the bottom of your bed. I don't like big runners. They don't work on my table. I guess like everything in my house has to be like very functional, right? If the runner is too big, there's no room for the placemats or the plates, or like your table might look pretty in between meals. My table doesn't look pretty. Like I try sometimes, but like there's crud all over the table. Like there's kids in and out. My husband, like I need something small. I like having something small like this that can actually sit in the middle of the table. You can still fit all the placemats around it, but I can there's usually a basket of apples on my table and sometimes a vase and some like pretty candle holders. This my dog's very angry at our neighbors for walking outside. So this is kind of like perfect size for me. So I had an Allison Glass charm pack, and what you do is you fuse each piece of fabric to one of the pieces of paper, and then I can do like a tutorial sometime if anybody really wants to see how to do this. But to make it, so I picked this. I planned to do in like a rainbowish, right, like pattern. I picked the color specifically, but I still had a ton left. So I made another one that's just random and scrappy with the leftovers. So there was no, like, absolutely no planning or intention behind this. It was just slap them together, and that was it. So I need to quilt these. This is on my short list of things to do because I'd actually like to start using them. I also have a binding that I finally, things are falling, a binding that I need to press. Like I've sewed all the strips together. I need to press it because, so I have an ironing board that is ready to fall over. There's so much up here. Let me see if I can get what I want without the whole thing just collapsing. Okay, that actually went pretty well. Okay, this quilt I finished recently, picked it up from the Long Armor. It's the pattern, well, it was a kit from Fat Quarter Shop called Turtle Dove. And it's very, like, to me, like, very Victorian, cottagey, which I definitely, the pink is a lot, the colors are a bit sharper than I would usually go for. I would usually, for this style, like softer colors. If I'm going to go bold, bright colors, I'm usually more into like Tula Pink. But I still like it. It was fun to make. My kids kind of helped me out a little bit. We made this at my cabin where I do have a sewing room, and just, spent time hanging out making it. I just need to bind it. Kind of embarrassing. So that's also on my short list to get done ASAP. I'm trying to see if I don't even know where the fabric is. Oh, here we go. I've been making curtains for my bedroom, and I need to finish these too. This is also on the short list. I love this fabric so much. I have no idea what it is. I bought it years and years ago, and I cut out the fabric for the curtains, and the fabric's just been sitting there waiting to be sewn for like a decade. Well, I've got 2 panels done and hanging. There's 6 panels I need to make for the bedroom. 2 of them are done and hanging. 2 of them are sewn together, need to just be turned and the opening stitch closed, because I have, this is probably a Moda. I do not care for Kona cotton. I find it scratchy. I don't like it. This is probably a Moda Bella Solid. I have this for the back of the curtains. So I have 2 more panels that I need to sew together. They're all cut. I love this fabric so much. And once we got the first 2 panels hanging in our bedroom, which was probably like a week ago, I like lost it. It looks so good. I'm really excited about that. So that's also on my short list of things to do. And I'm gonna try to point out, all right, so these are some DMC cabinets. This is where I keep, these are actually like, this actually doesn't have DMC in it for the most part. I have more DMC cabinets that do have DMC. These are like Weeks and Gentle Arts, Krynic, beads, that sort of stuff. Here are stacks of boxed kits. Those are not the only kits that I have that I haven't gotten to. But those are some of them. They just came up here recently. Those are cross-stitch project bags. There is no dearth of things to do in this house. All right, this is going to be a little tricky to show you. I have definitely been going through trying to use my stash. I am trying to buy much less. I am still very into Tula Pink, because I also make a lot of bags, and Tula Pink's fabrics make the best bags as far as I'm concerned. I've, in the last couple years, really gotten into Tilda fabrics and patterns, and her patterns are All the most recent patterns are all free on Tilda Worlds. It's the Tilda World, I think, is the website. Her stuff's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I have some Tilda kits, and I've been doing some of her fabric lately. But I'm much choosier about what I buy now because I'm trying to spend much less. And I'm trying to make use of some of the awesome stuff I have because I do have an awesome stash. I have a basement full of stash. And it needs to get used. So this book, Scrappiness is Happiness by Lori Holt, came out in the last probably 6 months or so, maybe last year. And there's lots of different quilts in here. I'm trying to be careful with it because I actually have fabrics cut in here. What I tend to do is keep whichever block I'm working on, like I'll keep those pieces in the book on their page. So I have several that are in progress. I don't think I have any that are complete. But what I am trying to make is this. This is a free setting that you can get at Fat Quarter Shop. And it has like one of all or most of the blocks in the book kind of into this setting. So you can kind of make one of everything. I am going to change. There's a Santa hat there. I don't want to do a Santa hat because it's the only one that to me is like, it just stands out as so blatantly seasonal. Like I can deal with a pumpkin and the apple, but like the Santa hat, I don't want the Santa hat. I think I'm just going to do like strips of fabric there. But anyway, I'm working on this. I've got like half a dozen blocks that are in progress. Because when I'm doing a Lori Holt blocks, usually what I'll do is like I'll cut for several blocks if I'm in the mood for cutting. And then I'll sit down and I'll sew the seams I can without having to press. Because I have to go to a separate area to press. Like it's not convenient and all in one place for me. And my pressing station and my cutting stations are temporary. They have to be set up and then broken back down. So I can't like do everything all at once. So I'll go to the sewing machine and I'll sew the seams that I can. And then sometime when I'm in the mood to press and to set up my pressing station, I'll take what I've done over and I'll do the pressing, and then I'll go back to the sewing machine sometime and I'll sew the next set of seams that I can sew. And then like the cycle just continues, right? So I've got like half a dozen blocks that are in progress. None of them are done yet. I'm way behind on like the sew along. That's okay. But I decided not to use Lori Holt fabrics. I have a stash of Lori Holt fabrics, not tons, but some. I like Lori Holt fabrics make like these great quilts. But the individual fabrics don't often excite me that much, if that makes sense. Like out of a line, 3 or 4 of them will be like, oh, I really like that. But that's usually it, right? And like when they all go together in a quilt and it gives you the whole color palette you need to make a lot of her really scrappy quilts. But I tend to be drawn fabric-wise much more to some other designers. So what I did was I pulled some of my fig tree quilt fabrics to make this quilt. This right here are the leftovers. This is Cinnamon and Cream, which is one of the Fig Tree's newer lines. I cut a fat quarter bundle into hexagons to do English paper piecing, and these were the leftovers. So I added those to the stash for this quilt. I think this was a half-yard bundle. I don't remember which line it was. And I don't have my glasses on. I have no idea. I think that's a half-yard bundle, and I also have, see, I've been cutting, so there's some just on top. This fat quarter bundle. So I pulled those, and I'm using those to make this Lori Holt, like, sampler quilt. I'm using my Lori Holt fabrics on some other things, but trying to get this book back where it goes. Pardon me a moment. I'm using the Fig Tree for that quilt, and I'm really excited. I think it's going to be amazing. there's just entirely too much going on over here. So this is a quilt also on my short list to finish. This is a quilt for my son. I am so slow. This is gonna be a huge quilt. I used to, when my kids were little, they would quilt with me, because that was, if I was gonna quilt, they were gonna have to be with me. So Liam, my oldest, he's 12 now. He was probably like 6 when I took him to a quilt shop and was like, you can pick out up to 8 fabrics and we'll figure out a quilt to make with them. And so anyway, he did. He picked out, I think there's 2 greens, 2 reds, 2 pinks, and 2 blues. I put them together just in simple 4 patches, kind of scrappy. I've only got a couple of the rows. I'm at the step of assembling rows before I will sew them together. And this is going to be a really big quilt. So I've got stacks of 4 patches that need to be put together. But that is also on my very short list of things that need to be done. I have no idea what this is doing here. What is that doing there? That's confusing. I don't know what that's for. And then another thing that I've started barely is The World of Lori Holt. So I fell in love with this quilt. So Riley Blake put out this booklet or catalog that has like everything Lori's ever made in here. And that's not what I was interested in. I love this quilt. I realized, so it's called like The World of Lori Holt, and I realized it's supposed to be like Lori Holt themed. But I looked at that and was like, that quilt is about empathy. That quilt is about loving everyone on this earth and this earth itself. I want to do the quilt. So I bought the catalog and the quilt kit, and I started cutting for it. Lori Holt stuff has so many pieces in it. It can be tough to stay organized. So I started cutting and then kind of decided to pause because at least for this one, I was feeling like things were going to be really tricky to stay organized. So I had started cutting and I was labeling things with these Post-it notes and pinning them together. And then I decided I tend not to buy a lot of products, right? Because I don't like lots of steps and I'm lazy. I ended up deciding I would in fact be better off if I went ahead and just ordered these, which are Lori Holt stickers for like, this is what she uses to organize all the pieces she's cutting for different blocks and things. And I decided I probably was better off getting these than continuing to like write on my Post-its and hoping I was getting it right. So I need to get back to this sooner rather than later. Okay, what else? I'm not going to put things back where they go, and I'm going to be all confused. I feel like I'm going to find this harder than cross-stitch videos to like keep the organization straight. I don't have any of my English paper piecing like that I've been working on here because this is my like machine sewing corner. But I'm thinking at some point I'm probably just going to do an English paper piecing video and just go through a bunch of the projects that I'm working on. I might also just do a video where I'm sitting in front of my bookshelf and sharing some of the books that I use a lot and love. What else? I'm trying to think of what else would be worth. Sorry, I don't mean to like show you my back. I have so many things that are in progress, but they're also not necessarily easy to like just pop in and out because everything is like a disaster here. Everything's just like stuff piled on top of stuff, piled on top of stuff. I think I might save other stuff for another day. And this might help motivate me too. This would be pretty cool to like actually get some of these things done here over the next several weeks, and maybe actually get to show you guys some finished stuff. I did a few years ago, I started this thing where I was trying to go through and finish a lot of old quilts, like quilts that have been sitting there for 10 years. I still have some that are kind of in that category that I need to finish up. But I kind of challenged myself to always have one dropping off at the long armor when I was picking one up. And I'm just starting to kind of get back into doing that, and it's been wonderful. I've finished a lot of quilts that way over the last few years. You know, when I drop a quilt off, I know I've got a few weeks minimum to get another one done. And I don't have as many quilts now, like old quilts now, as I did at the time. But there's a lot that like just needed borders sewn on and, you know, things like that. So it doesn't actually take that much effort. You just gotta actually sit down and do it. But I more frequently am sitting and doing handwork than sewing machine work these days. So I guess I'm gonna call it there for today. This still leaves a whole lot to show you guys in future videos. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you liked the video. If you didn't like the video, be polite about it. And ask me any questions that you have. I'll be happy to answer them if I can. Okay, thanks guys. I hope you have a good one. Bye.